gang, today I'm going to share with you what I consider to be the most underrated piece of gear from the 80s and the 90s. It is the Furman PQ-3 EQ. Now, I was first made aware of this when I saw it in Doug Aldrich's rack. I saw a picture of that online, and I figured he was using it like a graphic EQ, the way a lot of guys would throw a graphic EQ after their preamp or something like that. I didn't realize that is not how these guys were using it. Warren DeMartini had it in his rack. George Lynch was using it for a while there. Maybe that's where the great producer Michael Wagner became aware of it. He used it to great effect on Nuno Betancourt, Vito Bratta, Skid Row. He used famously the same rig where it was like the Furman into the ADA MP1. Then from there, Dimebag Darrell used it, but I think even the MXR EQ got a little more fanfare than the poor Furman PQ-3. There are several iterations of this. There's a green one, which is the earlier one from the 70s, I believe. Then they went with this, which is pretty cool, black with red knob version. There's a double stack where it's dual mono, which is called, I think, the PQ-6. They're all basically the same thing, and it's not really rocket science what's going on in here. It's just a good implementation of rack gear, and it sounds great. So what it is basically the biggest Boss graphic EQ on the planet. These guys would run into the Furman and out into their amp, boosting a little bit, shaping the tone a little bit. Same thing that many of us do with the Boss pedal. So why didn't this take off? Well, one of the reasons is that I don't think it was meant for guitar. Where do you plug it in? Like, you got to plug it in on the back, and which is pretty inconvenient, to be honest, especially if you're in a rack. You have to go around it, or you have to go into some rack interface, which goes into this in the back, which leads me to the other point, is there's no bypass. So let's say you just want to get straight into your amp without the boost. You're kind of SOL there. There is a bypass for the EQ, but whatever you set the input level to, which is the boost, or cut for that matter, it is what it is. So you could throw it in a rack mixer, a Bradshaw, or like a Red 7, and I could patch it in and out. So that's super nice, but it's certainly not like pedal board ready, and not even a simple setup at home. Like, I can't just leave it in the rack right behind me and always have to be patched into it, because it has a color and definitely wouldn't always want that color. One of the other reasons I don't think it took off is it's expensive. It's a studio rack gear, or maybe for live. But if you look at an MXR micro amp for whatever, $50, it's a lot different than dropping these days $500 to $700 on a big chunky piece of rack gear. But at the end of the day, it is bigger and fatter than really any setting on a Boss pedal, even a really nice modded one. Maybe it's something about the power supply, having high headroom. It just does it in a bigger way. It's a little tricky. You got to know your frequencies. Like, if you're a total beginner, you may be like, where do you put these knobs? I have no idea. So that's also a problem with the point of entry. But if you get it dialed in, and I'll show you some cool settings, it's really good sounding. The boost seems outrageously, like it says 1 to 10. And then it's kind of unity around 4.5, maybe. I'm not sure. It's really hard to find because there's no bypass. So when you're on 10, you think, oh, it's 10 dB a boost or maybe 5 dB a boost, but it feels like 50. It just can totally collapse the front end of an amp. Whereas like the Boss EQ, it gets loud, but it's just not in that same completely overwhelming thing. So it does require a little bit of a sort of a delicate hand, but when you get it, like Dimebag said in a clinic, he's like, oh yeah, I boost a little bit, I just goose the bottom a little bit, tighten the mids a little bit, work the highs a little bit, which was not very revealing on what he did, but it's kind of true. That's what you do with it. You just a little tweak, a little tweak, a little tweak, and the end result is pretty dramatic. Let's plug it into my Plexi over there, or 71 Super Lead, you know, close enough. And we're going into the Fryette Power Load IR. I'm gonna be using one of my IRs. They sound awesome. I finally, now I'm selling, it's primarily a 4 IR pack. It's cheap over there on my website, which is here. You can pick them up. They sound amazing for rock. And you know, Marshalls, Soldanos, Friedmans, that they just like best IRs I've ever heard. Let's plug this into my 71 Super Lead over there. I'll show you what it can do. I'm running through the Fryette Power Load with a Marshall 412 IR. It's one of my new IR packs. It's primarily 4 IRs. I use these all the time. They sound awesome. These will work with your Helix, your Axe effects, you know, in the computer, everything. It's nice and easy, drag and drop it in. Okay, this is direct into the Marshall. That's at 1. Okay, this is direct into the Marshall. Full blast. Sounds amazing. Totally unmodded. New tubes. Totally unmodded. Just is what it is. So the presence and the treble are at 10. The bass is at 6. The mids are about 8. And the volume, as I showed, varies. I like it most at about 7, which does this tightening up on the bottom end. As opposed to all the way up here, this is 10. Great, you get more gain, it's bigger. It's also like whistling at you from back here because it's just, you know, pushing. That's gonna happen too when I boost, but it's pretty versatile around 7. Nice, great. Straight in, just cable. So I'm using my lovely Sigma cable, which has this great quiet tip, which, check that out. Love this. That's the best. As opposed to all that stuff. All right, now let's go straight into the Furman. It's noisy, I'm sitting right next to the amp and lights and stuff. So now right away, it's gonna sound like there's like a buffer or something. So the top end lifts, it opens up a bit. This is as unity as I could get it. It's hard to tell because there's this tonal change with the buffer. Maybe it's straight up and down, I don't know. So just that, I prefer going straight in. I think it has a little more immediacy, and this sort of creates a little softer sound. But EQ is out, turning it up now. Well, you could go down here. Too much, right? Eight feels pretty good to me. Just to give us some headroom, I'm going back to 6. Before we kick in the EQ, I'm going to flatten this out a bit. This is the frequency you set. This is how wide of the curve it's going to be. It's called a Q. In this, they call it bandwidth. And then here's the boost or cut. So first, let's go into some bottom endy stuff. That feels better already. Cutting the bottom end gives me more headroom to boost as well. Now let's push out some mids. This is 1K, it's like the center. Just lose the mids, it turns into like a Fender. It's like frying bacon and whistling. Aside from the whistling, it sounds pretty great. Let me try and quickly reproduce this with a Boss EQ. Little tubby and flubby. Back to Furman in front. Now let's carve it out. That's pretty good. Awesome double track. Show you basically the same thing, but with a JCM 800. The master volume is at 4, way more manageable. It's not going to be squeaking and squealing, but the Plexi is more brutal. It's more immediate. It's just got more presence and punch. Here is, by the way, I love JCM 800s, but here's. Gain on 10, not a lot of gain. Right? When I turn the master up, it doesn't stay super tight, so we're going to stay in this volume at 4, and we're just going to push it. Through the Furman, no EQ part. Hit the EQ in. Tighten up the bottom by rolling out the bottom, the lows. I just didn't have the second camera. I don't even know if you can see this, so I'm going to bring this up. This is where I'm at. Bump, 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 bump. There we go. We'll just put you a little closer, right? So that's it, the Furman PQ-3. It's pretty awesome. There's a couple pedal manufacturers that make the PQ-3 in a pedal form. I haven't heard them. I can't vouch for them, but they look cool. The closest I've heard out of sort of the more mainstream pedals that gets in the ballpark is the Friedman Buxom Boost, where you've got the volume and then you could cut bottom and then you have some EQ, but you can't change frequencies. So that's a bit of a drag. And you can't cut the mids or the bottom, they're only boost. There's a shelf, but you can't. Anyway, it's different. It's not meant to be that. It's kind of does the fat EQ contour boost thing. A little more than the Boss EQ. The Boss EQ is a leaner, tighter, more cutting edgy thing. They're all cool, you know, whatever. All this stuff is cool. It's just another color. But, you know, this is cool. Super noisy, as you probably noticed. But, you know, if you feel like dropping $1,000 on like a giant Boss EQ, feel free. I got it for like $200 a long time ago. Anyhow, thanks for watching. See you later.